Welcome back to the First Team. I'm Joe DeLeone, and joining me is my good friend and NFL draft analyst, Ryan Roberts. Today, we've got draft news. We have a trade, Ryan. We have a trade. It's March.
Your voice
We
broke
get
up
to
a little
talk
bit
about
there,
trades.
man. Your voice broke a
I
little
don't care, man. I'm this juiced up. Well, look, this is free agency starts, and then this usually means it's the signal for draft trades could potentially happen, and we've got one that happened. The Minnesota Vikings have gone and acquired some additional draft capital. They go and get the Texans' 23rd overall pick. They also get pick 232. That's a very important pick 232. Houston is getting in return nothing crazy. Pick 42, 188, and then a 2025 second rounder. Now, Ryan, this trade isn't really one of those ones where it's like, oh my God, look, they moved up to 23. It's about what they're trying to do.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't try to make another move to get rid of somebody to add maybe a little bit more capital. But the whole big key takeaway here is they're trying to move up. I feel like in the next week or month, they're probably going to be picking somewhere in the top 10, maybe even the top 5 after all this is done.
First and foremost, Joe, this is why I hate when people scream and get super upset over mock drafts before free agency, guys, because it changes so quickly. I mean, we're not even talking about just free agency in general. We're talking about a trade that has happened this early. And yes, we know what this means, right? Well, there's only one it's funny, Joe. Someone on Twitter this morning, because I had made a comment about trading up for a certain quarterback with the 2 firsts now for the Minnesota Vikings. And someone had said, like, no, you just stay at 11 and 23. You draft this player at 11, this player at 23. I'm like, guys, they didn't get the extra first round pick, the number 23 overall pick, a random ass number, right? Like a random ass pick to just sit there and take the 2 best players at 11 and 23. We know why this happens, right? We saw what happened with the Los Angeles Rams a few years ago when they did this to go up and get Jared Goff, the Carson Wentz, and the Philadelphia Eagles. They were also a team that traded up to number 2 in that same draft to make sure that they got up into that top 10. They are moving up for a quarterback, Minnesota. The question now is, first and foremost, is who's going to be the trade partner? I think the New England Patriots make a lot of sense at 3, but that's another conversation for maybe a couple minutes here, right? But then the other part of it is too, Joe, is after we know who the trade partner is for the Minnesota Vikings to get into the top 10, who the heck are they trading up for? Do they want to make sure that they have the choice between 2 guys? Is there a guy that they definitely know is their number 1 guy on the board that they want to make sure that they secure after maybe the first or second quarterback off the board? A lot to figure out with what the Minnesota Vikings thought process is here. But regardless, I think we can all comfortably deduce this is a move to get a quarterback in the top 10.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number 1 source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. Bet online, where the game starts. So here's the one thing that makes the most sense to me with what you just said, and I'm grimacing at the thought of the follow-up to the second question they asked. The first part, from a lot of what we heard in Indianapolis, it sounds like the Patriots are viewing their roster rebuild as something that's going to take a little bit of time. They're a team that's going to want to get as many picks as possible. They have also been rumored, and it sounds like they could get it Justin Fields for a pretty cheap price if they go up and they traded for Justin Fields. I would argue that this trade situation that enables the Vikings to trade up and move the Patriots out of their pick, the Patriots move out of where they're slotted at number 3, they would then get additional capital where they wouldn't really lose anything to go and get Justin Fields. Probably don't even still have to spend a first round pick at all. Maybe it's that pick 23, and that would make the trade even easier. You get Justin Fields, you don't have to spend an early pick on a quarterback, and the Vikings go up and they go and get their guy. Now where this gets really gross and upsetting to me is that the one guy that has constantly been connected with the Minnesota Vikings has been JJ McCarthy.
Yes.
I have no problem. I've come to terms with the reality that JJ McCarthy could end up being a top 10 pick. It's inevitable at this point.
You've
But
accepted
if
it.
he is
You've accepted the possibility. Got it.
Yes.
Yep.
If he is QB3, Ryan,
Yes.
and he goes over Drake May or Jaden Daniels, this is Zach Wilson all over again. This could not be any more like Zach Wilson. And I don't want that for JJ McCarthy.
Yeah.
I don't want these ridiculously high expectations for him. I would hope that if this trade up does happen, it does end up being for Drake May or for Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, I mean, it would be for me, right? Like, if you're saying what guys, if you're getting the third quarterback off the board, who ideally is that? It would be either Drake May or Jaden Daniels, depending on how the board falls. For me personally, but there's just something there, Joe. There's something there, right? Like, it's not just one single whisper. This is how we determine what is smokescreen to reality this time of year. Is that when you hear it from one good source, all right, maybe they're getting smoke screened a little bit. But when you just start kind of hearing it constantly and hearing it and hearing it and hearing it, there's just a connection you start to build there. So something about JJ McCarthy in Minnesota just feels like it's a thing, right? And we'll see if that becomes more legitimate as we move forward. Because again, we don't even know where the trade's going to necessarily happen. I think New England makes a lot of sense because of like what you said, or the information that we are able to
Mhm.
gain in Indianapolis, that I believe that New England knows that their offensive roster is still a far way away from being anywhere near competitive, and the wanting to add substantial pieces to that. And one big way to do that is to add draft capital. And I think that's what you're potentially going to see from New England as a potential trade back partner. And then you move it for the next couple picks too, Joe. Like, I mean, number 4, you have the Arizona Cardinals, who have just kind of been that team that's like, that's where Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to go, right? Like, pick 4, Marvin Harrison
Yeah.
Jr., easy one. What's to say Arizona doesn't trade back? What's to say that they aren't the team that makes that decision to trade back as well? Because
They seem like a very likely one because like
yeah,
they're a team that's similar to the Patriots in that vein of like, hey, we need to pick up some capital because we're just trying to build this roster. They already have their quarterback, so it
yeah.
doesn't really hurt them to move back to 11.
Well, and I'll even give you another one as well. Is that what in a situation? Because again, if New England stays at 3, there's a reasonable chance that maybe they could take the first offensive tackle off the board. Who's to say they can't, right? What if they go offensive tackle? What if Arizona does do the traditional thing and says, I'm just going to take the best player in the draft in their opinion? And that would be Marvin Harrison at that point, right? Like, if that's their decision. And then number 5 becomes very valuable because who picks number 5? The Los Angeles Chargers, who are
They're also a trade back team.
the ultimate bargaining chip. They don't need
Yeah.
a quarterback in this draft. They already have Justin Herbert in the building. So if you do see 2 non-quarterbacks in the top 4 picks, that means QB3 could still potentially be there at pick 5 or QB4. So you can have your pick between whether it's Jane Daniels and JJ McCarthy or Drake May and JJ McCarthy, whoever you ultimately decide is the 4th best quarterback in this class. You have the option to make that selection there at pick 5 potentially. So 3 New England Patriots, 4 Arizona Cardinals, 5 Los Angeles Chargers. Those are the 3 easiest trade back partners in my opinion, because the other thing is that you could see non-quarterbacks go into all 3 of those teams, but then who picks at 6? The New York Giants. And you want to make
Yeah.
sure that you leverage and get yourselves in front of the New York Giants, because if one of those really good quarterbacks is on the board, I think that the Giants would definitely at least think about making that plunge.
Okay, so here is my final thought on this and really tinfoil hat season with this thought. I think that we need to also prepare ourselves
Yeah.
for somebody else to trade up before the Vikings do. I think that what's most important now is that the
Mhm.
Vikings have waved their arms in the air and said, "Hey everybody, we're
We're here.
trading up."
Right, right.
But yeah, we're about to trade up. So now all these other teams, and I think that like the New York Giants are a team that has been projected as maybe somebody being interested in a quarterback, that they would now feel pressured to move up and go and get a quarterback because they don't want to have to wait and see what happens at 6. And then I would throw in maybe a team like
Raiders
the
at
Raiders that
13.
doesn't have,
Yeah.
yeah, the future of their quarterback situation figured out, that they might be aggressive, which um oh my God, why is the name of the new head coach of the Raiders
Oh, Antonio
slipping my
Pierce.
mind?
Antonio Pierce. He's a
Antonio
former
Pierce.
Giant linebacker, you puts.
I'm
Like, come
sorry.
on, man.
It's shut up, shut up. It's early here. Antonio Pierce, though, when he was at the combine, um, spoke about wanting to be aggressive and
Yeah.
figuring out like the quarterback position. And so I think that now there is an even more intriguing angle to all this where somebody could still leapfrog the Vikings. The Vikings aren't for sure like, hey, they move up to 4, they land in their spot. The
Yeah.
Broncos, another team that needs a quarterback that's in that range. So there's a lot of craziness that could happen
Yeah.
in the next month if the Vikings don't move quick.
Well, that's what I was going to say is that I don't think the Vikings are going to be necessarily just pointing at the Chargers, for instance, right? And being like, hey, we want to get up to 5 because then you have the opportunity to get leapfrogged. I think that the conversation right now, if you are, because clearly Minnesota wants a quarterback. I mean, again, we have deduced that. That's an easy thing to figure out. They are have to be in the conversation with the New England Patriots more than anyone right now. Because if you want to make sure that you don't get jumped, you got to get up to 3. You have to get up to 3 because let's be honest, you're not going to get up to 1 unless Chicago is just befuddling us and actually going to stick with Justin Fields, which I just don't think is going to happen. I think they're going to take a quarterback at 1, quarterback
Yeah.
2. I must call them the Redskins. The Commanders are going to take a quarterback at 2. Number 3 is the spot that if you're the Minnesota Vikings, that is the only person I'm talking to right now. New England, what's it going to take to get up to number 3 to make sure the Giants, the Raiders, or any other miscellaneous team can come up and leapfrog me in those situations. So yes, you're not starting by talking to 5, talking even to 4. You're talking to 3 to make sure that you get up and get your guy potentially, and there's no ramifications down the stretch or any threat of a team jumping you for the guy that you want.
Let's see what happens, folks. There could be a lot of craziness that is started by just this singular move. There could be a lot of teams that try to make some aggressive moves in order to get up into that top 4 or even top 3. At Joe DeLeone at Rise and Draft, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for tuning in and joining us to react to the news. We'll be back next week with more or later on this week, depending on when you're tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your week, folks.